Go. Well, welcome back to Let's Be Real, where we talk about real life issues and real life experience. This is episode number 3. I'm Slink.
Don Fields here.
I'm Jabari Wells, and I'm actually introducing our first guest. This individual holds a BS in management as well as a master's in business administration. He's the president of the Westchester Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, currently on a task force to reopen the economy for Westchester County, selected for the county executive, and a surrogate for the FWD US America on Immigration Issues. This individual has given back to his community by mentoring students at SUNY New Paltz, as well as United Way Business Hope members. He helps organize events for the Emerging Leaders Alliance, which is an association of the United Way. He has helped an international non-for-profit focus on women's education, Educate to Envision, to expand schools in Central America. He currently serves on the Educate to Envision's advisory board and is helping launch entrepreneurship programs to facilitate student engagement with launching and sustaining their own businesses. This individual is a member of various regional business associations in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. He is also on Fortune's magazine 40 Under 40. Ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Monroy. Eddie Monroy, how's everything?
How you doing, Eddie?
Hey there, how are you?
I'm
Good.
doing all right.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Of course, thanks for having me on. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes,
We can hear you very good.
All right, perfect. I got the AC in the back, so I'm not sure. I'm trying to keep cool, in this hot summer.
I hear you. I understand. Well, first off, tell us what got you into politics in the first place.
Well, some people say it's a little bit of a calling. For me, it was a must for me to essentially get involved. Essentially, my really the status of my parents up until earlier this year was in limbo. And then really right now, the state of the situation for a large majority of Hispanic immigrants is still living in limbo today. So knowing that my parents came to this country seeking a better opportunity, building a better life for themselves, putting me through school, my late sister helping put us both through school, and knowing that I spoke the language, I was educated, I had connections within the business community and also within the government community, it forced me really to get involved and actually have a voice for those that don't have a voice.
Okay. I definitely can relate to speaking for others that can't be spoken up. And that's what this podcast is really all about, is just focusing on different situations that a lot of people don't speak about or might not have the platform to speak on. How long was your parents in limbo for before they even got any recognition or response back about that?
Yeah, so to give it a little bit of context, my parents have been in this country within a program called TPS, which stands for Temporary Protected Status. And it's a federal law that was passed back in 1990. So prior to 1990, this program did not exist. And essentially, there were only two real forms of what's called legal status. And that's what we traditionally hear in the media and what we know of called the green card, which is a permanent residency. And then you have U.S. citizenship, which allows you to have access to vote. Prior to that, there really was no other platform to have an avenue unless you had some type of a work visa or a student visa that allows you to be here part-time for a certain cause. So student visa allows you to be a student seeking higher education. A work visa allows you to work in a certain field, normally a field where there's scarcity, such as technology or agriculture work. And my parents necessarily didn't qualify for any of those programs. So prior to that, there is really a new avenue that was created. Bipartisan bill that was passed back in 1990. And what it allowed is what I call the definition of green card light. So a US citizen is allowed to vote, is allowed to have a social security card, which means you have access to the financial markets. A green card does not allow you to vote, but allows you to do everything else. And what TPS allows you to do is it does not allow you to vote, and it does not allow you to travel outside the United States and then come back in with entry. So it's essentially a program with restrictions. And so it provides you a social security card. It provides you access to the financial markets, provides you work authorization, so you can work wherever, and you can also go to university. So my parents are under that program. And that program, essentially, there's a clause within the law when it was first passed, which mentioned Congress has the ability later in time to seek out a permanent solution for this population of individuals. We fast forward to 2020. It is, we're in July, and there still has not been a solution for TPS.
It's actually pretty interesting that you brought up the concept of voting several times. And that's actually one of the things that we wanted to talk about today in one of our 3 segments. Is the first is going to be the importance of voting, one, and then being a minority voting. Don or Slink, do you guys have any other experiences about your own stories?
I just wanted to ask you, before we get into like the discussions and stuff, for TPS, I think you said it's called?
Correct, TPS.
Yes. So is there like rules or anything you have to follow under, like, while in this program?
So you're familiar with the driver's license, correct? Where you go to the DMV and you finally have that little piece of card. At first, it's a little piece of paper. Then it's a little piece of plastic that you can carry around. TPS essentially is the same concept, where you file to be in this program. They send you an identification card, and it allows you to have access to some of the platforms that I was just mentioning before. From there, it's up to the administration at the time. So the executive branch has the ability to either continue the program or eliminate the program for a certain sector of the population. So right now there's 13 countries that qualify to be under TPS. The majority of those companies are Central American companies, but also some countries. There are some countries from the West Africa region and the East Asia region as well. And what you have to do is, depending on the adherence of the administration, you either have to refile every 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months. And from the establishment of 1990, it had always been essentially a precedent where it was always pretty much renewed every 18 months. So my parents would always be essentially living in limbo, just waiting for the word. Is it getting renewed? Yes, it's getting renewed. Okay, great. You pay the fee and you continue to live and go about your normal day-to-day life, right? Up until 2017, where the current administration came into power and mentioned, we actually want to eliminate the program. And that's where we got into situations in terms of legalities of whether an executive branch is allowed to have the power to do that. And that's when I came into the fold to finally speak up on behalf of not just my parents, but also aunts, uncles, and the vast majority of this population, which is about 485,000 people that are in this program at the moment right now. And to put a little further context, I'm not sure if you're all familiar with a program called DACA, which is a pretty popular program that's out there. DACA was actually created under the Obama administration and formed and essentially looked at TPS as a mechanism to create this program. So DACA is for kids under a certain age that came into the country undocumented without necessarily their knowledge that they were undocumented, and granted rights to have a social security, which allows you to go to school and
Yeah.
also allows you to go get a job, and have some other benefits that we all share today. That program essentially was established based on the backs of the legislation of TPS. The only difference between DACA and TPS is that DACA was an executive order issued by the President of the United States, in which another administration could come in and just rewrite that executive order and deny it, which is what we're seeing in the courts today. And TPS is a federal legislation that has been passed. And that's why there's a lot of court rulings on whether, up until this year, is it legal or is it not legal to cancel out a program in its totality. And both programs do not allow a pathway to citizenship, which ultimately allows truly what the Constitution says allows you to be an American citizen, in which you cannot have your alienable rights revoked.
Yes, sir. So with these people in the program, they're paying, following these rules, and that doesn't guarantee them that they'll become an American citizen?
6, 12 months, or 18 months, you renew the fee to continue to participate in the program. And both programs do not allow a permanent pathway to citizenship. So once you're in this program, essentially you're stuck in the program, because I'd rather be in the program for a lot of these people in the pool than not being in the program at all, and what's called being in the shadows, not having access to the financial markets, and living with fear that ICE any day can essentially knock on your door, either at your home or at your workplace, and remove you from the country, and essentially hold you indefinitely in containment somewhere, who knows where.
Did you have anything, Don?
Nah, I'm just saying, like, that's crazy to me. Like, I didn't even know that. That's like an eye opener for me. Like, that's the ultimate goal, to gain citizenship to the country so that you could actually be an American. And for them to put a program in place and have people that, I mean, I'm pretty sure they know they're trying to gain citizenship, to put them through that cycle year after year. Like you said, your parents in limbo, like, that's got to be such a crazy experience to, like, not know, like, are they actually going to accept it this year? Like, especially
Exactly.
with everything going on right now with the pandemic and everything like that. Like, that's such a crazy experience to me. That's hard. Like, that hurts my heart to hear that type of stuff.
And the majority of immigrants, we all know, are hardworking. They're trying to pursue the American dream, just like all of us. Right now, right, no matter what the situation is, we're all affected by this pandemic, one shape, way, or form or another, whether it's financially or health or even socially. And now you add an extra heightened set of fear of, am I going to even be allowed to be here next month? Am I going to even be allowed to continue to work if I'm an essential worker? Because it could come and read through the system that my Social Security number has been expired. And that's essentially what happens. We're at a state and point where we don't know legally what happens once someone is essentially kind of kicked off this program. What happens to all of that? So luckily, as a family, for us, earlier this year, there had been other legal challenges that had been immediately enacted once the administration decided to cancel both TPS and also DACA. And there is a piece of legislation out in the Ninth Circuit. So in the United States, you have your local courts, then you have what's called appellate courts, and then you have what we all know, the Supreme Court. So the appellate courts are broken up into essentially 12 districts all across the country. And the Ninth Circuit in what takes place is from Seattle, from the state of Washington down to California. So all those western coastal states, includes Alaska, includes Hawaii. They came with a ruling that said that if you have TPS and you meet one of these 3 metrics, you actually do have a pathway to citizenship. So one of the 3 are you're either sponsored by an employer, so an employer sponsors you. That honestly can take years for it to reach the level of where you can get a green card and then ultimately apply to be a citizen. The other one is you marry someone that is a U.S. citizen. So my mom and my dad met here in the United States. They were both from Honduras, so they're non-U.S. citizens who married each other here in this country and set up their lives. So number 2, that doesn't qualify them. But 3, if you have a parent or a son who is a U.S. citizen, and I was born in New York, I was born in Newburgh. My grandparents passed away years ago, and were not U.S. citizens. So the only pathway my parents had were me. And through this ruling in court out in the Ninth Circuit. So it took close to a 2-year journey that finally came to a close on March 12th, in which the judge granted both my mom and dad permanent residency, which now opens the door to citizenship 5 years from now when they want to qualify to take the U.S. citizenship test and oath and finally become a citizen. So that's a step, but we're talking about, close to a 30+ year journey to get there.
And we got 5 years before, and there's no guaranteeing what happens in between those 5 years.
Right. So it's a great thing that you mentioned that, because what we're seeing right now is there is actual buzz coming from the current administration that they want to extend the time that you can file for being a U.S. citizen. So right now, the requirement is 5 years. Once you have your green card, you have to wait a minimum of 5 years in order to take the citizenship test. And you have to pass the citizenship test, you have to take the oath, and then you become a full legal U.S. citizen in which nothing can be revoked. Your citizenship can no longer be revoked. And during that time, you can't commit a heinous act. You can't commit a serious infraction with the law, or your green card could be at stake. But something, so it can be taken away. But something that the administration and other strong conservative groups have proposed out there is extending the time anywhere from 7 years to even 10 years between you can wait to take that citizenship test. So now you're talking about, a whole generation of people that are ineligible to potentially vote.
Yeah, that's crazy.
One thing that brings us back around to the importance of voting is that how you talked about how the current administration is trying to essentially take back what other administrations had already put into place. So I wanted to ask the question of, and we're starting with you, Don, is when did you find out that it was important to vote, and when did you start making that more of a message of, I don't really know if my vote counts, to turning the narrative to, I know that I should be voting every time I get a chance to vote, starting with you, Don, and then Slink, and then Eddie?
Yeah, like for me, like it probably was when I got to college, when I started seeing, like understanding the world around me, and I kind of started looking into politics a little bit more, and then learning about like my history and like how my ancestors and people that look like me fought for voting rights, like was out there in the streets, like all type of crazy stuff was happening to them when they were just trying to fight for their right to vote. So it's almost like just thinking about what they fought for and understanding that like it's bigger than just me. Like, and then that goes to on a national scale, like somebody might, like I used to think like, yeah, my vote doesn't count, but at the end of the day, like it's still a contribution, and regardless how big or how small that contribution is, like it's still a contribution. Like it's still that's my word, that's my say, and it's getting sent somewhere. So it might not. People, I know people probably feel like since it's not a big contribution, like it doesn't mean anything. But like at the end of the day, it's a contribution. And once I started thinking of it that way, like that's when I was like, man, I gotta go out there and vote whether it's the primary or if it's something local. Because I mean, local, that's one of the most important places that people need to vote. It's like locally, because that's what immediately affects you and everybody that you live with and everything like that. So, but yeah, it was when I got to college. That's when I started realizing.
Yeah. For me, when I was younger, I used to hear a lot of your vote don't count. Growing up where we come from in the inner city, most people do not vote. Like it's just something that they don't do because they probably were taught that their vote didn't count. And when I got to college, actually, a professor sat me down. He asked me, "Are you registered to vote?" And I'm like, "I'm actually not." And I said, if I could have voted, I would have voted for Obama. He asked me why, and I said, well, he was the first Black president. And he said, can you tell me anything else about him? And I was like, and I really couldn't. Like I couldn't tell him anything about him, but I could tell him that he was Black. And he said, that's one of the reasons that most people did vote for this guy is because he was Black and not because of what they knew about him. They didn't know what this person does to impact their life, and they didn't know what one vote or one support, because that's all it is, one supporter can do to help change. So when I learned that, I stopped saying that my vote didn't count, and I tried to change other people's minds on why my vote and your vote, that's 2 more votes now. Now, if we can get somebody else, that's 3, and you get how that works. Now, if we can start changing minds, and that's my mindset. But yes, that's when I learned was in college.
You know, the power of amplification, right? So your vote, and then you get a friend to vote, and then you get a family member to vote, right? Your vote just multiplied in terms of how much you can have an impact. You know, I have a stat here that I looked up before about the African American vote back in 2016. So the last presidential election was 59.6%. And that's actually a decrease from Obama's second term, his re-election, at 66.6%. So the amount of people that didn't come back out to vote has so much an effect at the end of the day. You know, I think about people like my parents, right, who can't vote. I think about people that you know, are 16 years old and are starting to form their opinions on how they want to see and shape the world, but yet they can't vote. You start thinking about, you know, historically, all the people that fought so hard to get us to this place in which we can vote. Martin Luther King, right? So many great leaders of the past that have allowed us to have a voice, and that's what it is. It's a voice that my vote counts, right? When we think about, you know, something super hyper local, right? So I mentioned the presidential election. When we think about a place like Newburgh, New York, so Newburgh has about 30,000 residents. But when you look at the last election for mayor back in 2019, we only saw a few thousand voters come out to vote. So when you think about eligibility, so of those 30,000, how many people were eligible? And then of those eligible voters, how many people just did not come out and vote? And why didn't they come out and vote, right? That's also a very important topic to talk about. But the importance of why voting matters, it's so important because you often enough can't really just think about the top of the ticket, which really means, you know, who's that quote unquote celebrity that is leading the turnout. So Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, right? They're leading the top of the ticket. But then you look every other person, right? Who's voting for the local seat, for the local mayor, for the council, for something that's super important, which is the school board education. So who's actually forming budgets for our school system to allow us, like right now during pandemic, school districts are having such a tough issue handing out laptops to students that don't have computers, don't have access to internet, right? That all comes from a local level and having that local voice. And we think, oh yeah, top of the ticket, they kind of solve that stuff. No, actually it gets solved at a local level. And if anything, it should be turned upside down. Can you imagine what this country would look like if the turnout would be as high for local elections? This country would look completely different. We would have such a new slate of candidates running, and actually have more of a unified community, knowing that, you're watching my back and I'm watching your back, and that you're going to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are going to go to something of value.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's so funny. My experience was more of how Donovan's experience was after learning more about my history, about how people literally died, marched, sat down, got bit by dogs, water hose, just to allow us the opportunity to vote. And then how can I, a Black man, as a Black individual in this world, say, I don't think my vote counts. I'm not about to waste the time to go down there to even punch the ballot, when people literally gave their life for me to have this opportunity. It wasn't until I fully realized that it really does mean something, and every vote counts. And as you just alluded to, every single level counts, whether it's for the city council or it's for the president of the United States, everything counts. And that actually ties into the second topic of the business of politics, because everything has a cost. And as you already alluded to, how me watching your back, that also goes then to deals that's going on behind the scenes. And one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure anybody can just literally Google, a lot of these big corporations feed or fund political, campaigns, whatever side that they believe on. And one thing that I've realized is that Apple, who has $1 trillion market capitalization, literally feeds both sides. Whether you're Democratic or Republican, I don't care who wins, we'll feed both of you as much money as we can, and whichever side wins, you took our money, so now you owe us one. So just starting with Slinky, what do you think about the business behind the scenes of being a politician?
I always said I only wanted to be a politician to see how powerful I can become, because those was like the world's most powerful people right there sitting in front of us.
Yeah.
And like the business side, back to why presidential campaigns are big, because of the business side of the political campaign. They get the support of Apple. They get the support of a Walmart. You get what I'm saying? Now, these local ones, it's not as big because it really goes off word of mouth. It's people walking around, are you registered to vote? You should come out and vote. It ain't really commercials on your local elections. So for one, it seemed like, oh, the primary election, the presidential election is what's so important to us. Those are the people that's going to make our changes, because that's how it's presented to the people. Now, if you don't have somebody coming out telling, like us guys are doing right now, that you need to pay attention to your local elections, you need to get familiar with the people that are running. Those are the people that sitting in courthouses and stuff, affecting most inner city kids. But those are things that they don't know, again, because there's not enough money behind it to probably show how it should be shown, but it goes word of mouth. That goes back to saying, hey, your vote matters. All right, let me show you why. See why your vote matters? Now you go tell somebody. And that's exactly what we need to do, because the business side, they have Walmart and Apple to help them do that. The locals don't.
Yeah. Don?
Yeah, like you said, I think you chimed on it a little bit. Like millions of billions of dollars. Like I know, like today, like we have this cancel culture, and like people are starting to see like what large corporations are putting money to certain candidates and stuff like that. So that's like one of those things that's like, it kind of goes behind the scenes, and like you could kind of see like where money is going, because that's really important. Like where you see the money going is like, that's really on a national scale. That's where it's gonna change like a lot of the big things. But like you said, we don't really see like commercials or ads being run on talking, tell you to go vote, when that's probably the most important place you need to vote. Like if you had to choose between one or the other, like you should probably choose local because that's the one that's gonna affect you the most. But and it's just crazy that you don't see ads being run on this or commercials, or you don't see a lot of revenue being pushed to maybe candidates locally to for people to vote and stuff like that. So it's just like a weird dynamic how they have all this money going nationally, which I can understand, like it's the country, but for every individual in this country, it's probably the most important place to vote is locally.
1000%. Everything starts at a local level, right? Whether it's an issue that we're seeing, most recently with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? It happened locally. It happened with a death of George Floyd. That necessarily didn't happen at a major city like New York, and it was national news. It didn't necessarily happen in Washington, D.C., where it's like a major city, and oh yeah, because it happened in a major city, it has to be national news. No, it's local news, right? Situation that happened in Ferguson as well, in Missouri. That's a local issue. Often enough, our issues that arise all starts and stems from a local level. You know, when you look at 2016 and it's like every single political race, everything gets more amplified and amplified, thinking that one single individual can actually solve it. And no, that's not the answer. And often enough, I'm not sure if that's just the type of messaging that goes out there, or it's just a lack of education from a local level. Because we are seeing more and more, especially Main Street businesses going out of business, right? That means that dollar is now going somewhere in a national scale. We're seeing more and more local papers going out of business. What does that mean? Well, I don't know what my local mayor or my local council person said. I have no idea. And if they're not on social media, we'll never know. And if they're not a major celebrity, who cares, right? We won't hear about that. But they're the ones having the most impact. Something that I recently discovered, and I was watching a documentary about 2 weeks ago. The president of the United States currently right now under law makes roughly around $400,000, right, as a salary. There was a local city manager in the state of California making as much as $800,000 for a city of close to 25,000 residents.
Wow.
So how do people get away with that? Because on a local level, we're not voting. We don't know what's happening in the scenes. This election cycle in terms of 2020, I mean, it's gonna be the most expensive political race of all time history of not just politics in this country, but potentially even globally. We're looking at billions of dollars being spent. Back in the campaign of 1992, in which it was Bush Sr.'s re-election campaign against Bill Clinton, there was roughly around just a little over 200 million spent on that campaign. In 2016, it was 1.6 billion.
Wow. That's crazy. That is crazy, and the number's only going to get bigger from there.
And they're only
we have
get
5.
bigger.
We have 5 minutes left. I just want to take the time to thank you for coming on. Your time is precious to us on this show, and one thing that we can't get back is time. So that means the most to me. You educated me because I tell people all the time I'm not a politician. I really don't have a political view, but you have inspired me to go out here and get more educated and to pay more attention, and to above all make sure I tell people that their vote counts. I pray for you and your family to make sure they go and get their citizenship. I know you personally. You're a friend of mine, and I'm always rooting for you. Fellas, do you have any closing remarks for yourself?
I just want to say, like Barry said, thank you for your time. Like I said, that's something that we don't get back. And I thank you for not only listening, but educating the three of us also. And like Barry said, I'll be also praying for you and your family. Please stay safe in these times and continue just to spread the word. You're doing what you're doing. You're doing something great, man. So thank you.
Yes, I can only say thank you again, man, and please stay safe. We're praying for you, and you opened my eyes. I learned something today. Like, so I know when we put this
Yeah.
video out, like it's probably gonna be, I don't even know. I don't want to say a number. There's gonna be a lot of people that learn something new today from you. So I really appreciate you doing that.
I appreciate that. You know, I thank you all for giving me, you know, moments of your time just to share some knowledge. I think it's very important, you know, living in the era that we live in with technology, social media, and being one of the most educated generation of all time in this country, that I think we have forgotten on what it's like to listen. And there's a lot of leaders that are out there that lead, but often enough, it's also important to sometimes take a step back and take a knee, literally, and just listen and see what's going on, right? You know, stressing the importance of voting. Voting affects every aspect of our lives, right? There's people that don't have a voice and literally are yearning to have a voice, but they can't have that. We think about the history of this country and where we've been, and we are destined to do so much good. And it's just a matter of time when we all really step up and continue to remember every decision that happens always starts locally and affects everything else. Because what we think about an elected official, whether it's a mayor or a president, right? Their time is only there for a short amount of time. Often enough, it's the judges that we elect that enact a law that can be there for decades, such as the program that my parents were in. We're talking about 30 years, they're still living in limbo. So go
All right,
vote,
before we
go
go,
register.
yeah,
Whoa.
before we go though, we got to put you in a hot seat situation. Give us a 30-second pitch of what you would do if you were president of the United States.
Ooh, 30-second pitch.
Yes, sir.
One thing or many things?
You got a minute to give us a speech. What you got?
All right. One thing I would do is I would make Washington, D.C. a state. I would leave it up to Puerto Rico to decide if they would like to receive statehood as well. I would also work with all branches of government to pass some type of a form of a green bill, healthcare for all, right? That's easily accessible, and as well as immigration reform, because we're
All
only
right.
as strong as immigrants we have.
Yes,
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank
You're
you.
always welcome back on Let's Be Real 845.
Please
Sounds
come
good.
back and be real with
Sounds
us.
good. Let me know and
Have
I'll
a
come
good
back.
one.
Peace out, guys.
All right.